I stood there in the doorway, the smell of lemon and roasted potatoes still clinging to the air as my son brushed past me without a glance. "You should be grateful we visit," he said, setting his keys on the counter like he owned the place. The words didn't sting right away, not until the silence that followed made them true. After 30 years of building a home from nothing, after every holiday spent proving I was worth the invitation, I finally understood. Gratitude shouldn't come with conditions, and neither should love. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Janine wiped her hands on a dish towel that had long ago lost its color. The timer buzzed behind her. Roasted potatoes, crisping in the oven. Chicken salad chilled in the fridge, made with just the right crunch of celery. The way Carter used to like it when he was 10, and everything she did still mattered. She heard tires on gravel, and her heart fluttered in the old familiar way. Hope braided with dread. The front door creaked open before she could reach it. "We just stopped by on the way up to Big Bear," Renee announced, breezing in like a realtor showing a house she didn't respect. Her voice was all lacquered politeness and iced tea sweetness, the kind that left your teeth aching. Ava followed, earbuds still in, hoodie zipped halfway. She offered a half smile that looked almost apologetic. Carter was last. He barely glanced at his mother, brushing past her like he'd forgotten who she was in the hour since their last phone call. Janine folded the dish towel and set it on the counter with precision, breathing through the sting in her chest. "I made lunch," she said, voice too cheerful. "You must be hungry." Renee's eyebrows lifted. "Oh, you didn't have to do that. We're just stopping in." "I know," Janine said, forcing the smile that used to come naturally. "But I thought it'd be nice." They settled at the old oak table she'd refinished last spring, every scratch sanded down like a memory she wanted to forget. Janine brought out the plates, careful portions, fresh herbs clipped from her garden. The kind of meal made with a mother's time, not just her hands. Renee took one bite, then reached for salt. Interesting flavor profile," she said. "Did you use lemon? It's a bit bright." Carter didn't even look up from his phone. Ava whispered a quiet, "Thank you," eyes darting to her father, then back down to her plate. Janine sat last. She watched the meat, well, not eat exactly. Renee picked, Ava nibbled, and Carter barely touched his food. "You want coffee?" Janine asked, trying to pretend she hadn't noticed. Carter sighed like the weight of the world was his to carry. "You should be grateful we visit at all." The words fell like a slap. For a moment, no one moved. The tick of the wall clock grew louder. Ava looked up sharply. Renee pressed her lips together, eyes carefully avoiding Janine's. Janine blinked. Then she smiled. A soft, precise smile, the kind she used to give nurses when they said her pain was just in her head. "Of course," she said quietly. "I am." Ava's mouth parted, like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Janine gave her a slight nod. It was all she could manage. The rest of the visit unraveled quickly after that. Tense sips of coffee, a photo taken for Grandma's fridge, and Renee reminding Carter they really should beat the snow to the cabin. They left with hugs that didn't land, promises to call, and the scent of Janine's rosemary still clinging to their clothes. Hours later, Janine sat at the edge of her bed, her back stiff, her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict that had already been handed down years ago. The phone buzzed. It was Colleen, her neighbor and only friend left, who didn't ask her to apologize for existing. "How'd it go?" Colleen asked. Janine opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then, finally, "Fine." There was a long silence. Colleen had always known how to read between syllables. "He acts like you're a rest stop," she said, voice low. "Not a mother." Janine didn't argue. She stared out the dark window where Carter's taillights had vanished hours ago. And somewhere inside her, something small and long dormant shifted. Janine sat alone at the kitchen table, long after the sun had spilled its final gold across the linoleum. The leftover potatoes were packed into plastic containers and pushed to the back of the fridge. No one had asked to take any. She opened the drawer beneath the microwave. It stuck, like it always did, but gave way with a grunt. Inside, a folder rubber-banded twice, labeled in thick Sharpie. Legacy plan, preliminary. She carried it to the table, careful not to spill her mug of chamomile. The house was dead quiet now, save for the hum of the old refrigerator and the groan of baseboards cooling. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows like it wanted to come in and tell her something. She unfastened the rubber band, pulled open the flap, and began to sift. Deed, title, last paid property tax bill, mortgage discharge notice. The weight of 30 years sat in those papers. Every signature, every notarized seal, bought with double shifts, missed vacations, shoes patched instead of replaced. She had scrubbed toilets in hotels where guests never learned her name, smiled through slipped discs and seasonal bronchitis, all to keep this roof steady over Carter's head. And it was paid off, fully, in her name alone. A soft sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. She turned to the back page of the legacy plan. There, under primary beneficiary, was a name typed in clean, smug font, Carter James Winters. Her eyes lingered on it. Then she reached for a thick black Sharpie from the ceramic cup on the table. With a steady hand, she drew a single line through the name. Not angry, not messy, deliberate, permanent. The black ink bled slightly at the edges of the paper, but it felt clean. A knock at the sliding door made her jump. Colleen stood outside in her oversized hoodie, holding a Tupperware of banana bread and wearing the look of someone who didn't expect to be invited in, but always showed up anyway. Janine slid open the door. "I made too much," Colleen said, stepping inside. "And I figured if I didn't come by, you'd be in here stewing over it all night." Janine gave a ghost of a smile. Too late. Colleen set the banana bread on the counter. Her eyes landed on the open file, then the black mark cutting Carter's name in half like a guillotine had fallen. "Well," she said softly, "that's overdue." Janine leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "He thinks I'm a safe deposit box with a heartbeat. No. He thinks he's circling an inheritance like a vulture circling roadkill." Colleen's voice was cool. "You think he'd come around if this house didn't exist?" Janine didn't answer right away, then quietly. "Then let's make sure there's nothing to circle." Colleen raised an eyebrow. "You serious? I'm done leaving things behind for people who only remember I exist when they're hungry or on their way somewhere better." She walked to the landline, mounted near the pantry. It was old, yellowed from years of sun, the kind with physical buttons and a worn-out spiral cord. She picked it up, dialed from memory. After a few rings, a man's voice answered. Crisp, familiar. "Aaron Beck," he said. "Estate and Family Law." "Hi, Aaron, it's Janine Winters." A pause. Then warmth, cautious but real. "Janine, hey, it's been a while." "It has." She glanced again at the black line across Carter's name. "But I'm ready to update some things." There was the sound of papers rustling on his end. "All right, when do you want to come in?" "As soon as you've got a chair open." She hung up, her finger resting lightly on the receiver. The silence afterward wasn't heavy. It was clean, like something had been cut loose and drifted away. Colleen leaned on the doorframe, watching her. "You're really doing it." Janine met her gaze. Her voice didn't shake. "This house is mine. It cost me more than money. If he wants a legacy, he can build one like I did, brick by brick, alone." Colleen nodded slowly, but something flickered in her eyes, something that said she knew this wasn't just about Carter, not anymore. Janine reached for the file and snapped it shut. Her fingers were still steady. The text came mid-morning. "Carter, you need anything fixed at the house? Before winter hits?" Janine stared at her phone a moment too long. The words weren't laced with care. They landed like a post-it slapped on her door from someone more interested in looking helpful than being helpful. She typed back 2 words, "I'll manage," then muted the thread and slid the phone face down on the counter. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon balm and banana bread. Janine tied her jacket around her waist and stepped outside, clipboard in hand. Left over from a garage sale 2 years ago, the kind you only use when you're tired of forgetting things. The wind had shifted. Autumn had crept in overnight with brittle fingers and sharp air. She walked the perimeter of the house with the slow, methodical pace of someone inspecting a memory she was getting ready to let go of. The siding needed a fresh coat of paint in the spring, but it wasn't peeling. Gutters, clear. Fencing along the side yard, slightly warped, but intact. She made small notes in pen, circling the number for an inspector she vaguely remembered from a neighborhood recommendation thread. By noon, she'd scheduled HVAC, roof, and foundation assessments. She used a different name each time, Ms. Weller, just in case anyone decided to mention her calls to anyone else. Small-town tendencies weren't good at keeping secrets. In the garage, she pulled out old U-Haul boxes flattened behind the shelving unit. Dust clung to them like regret. She started in the guest room closet. It was easier that way, touching the things that didn't sting. Books Ava never opened. Photo frames from dollar stores, still in plastic wrap. The wreath Renee gave her once, full of fake cranberries and beige ribbons, brittle and breaking at the edges. She packed them slowly, writing relocate, guessed on each box with a thick black marker. The word relocate tasted strange, bold, like she wasn't just moving items, but shifting the axis of her life. Later that afternoon, she met Aaron Beck in his office above the old post office downtown. The place smelled like cedar and vanilla coffee creamer. He hadn't changed much. Same quiet, precise presence, the kind you'd want beside you in a courtroom or a funeral. He listened as she outlined her intent. Clean sale, no notification, no leaks. Aaron steepled his fingers, leaning back. It's possible to do a quiet listing, he said. Private buyer, no open houses, no signage. The kind of thing that doesn't ripple until it's done. Janine tilted her head. And Carter wouldn't know. Not until escrow's closed and the deed is updated. He paused. You sure that's the direction you want? Janine didn't blink. Perfect. Let's keep it silent until it's final. Aaron scribbled a few notes. I'll coordinate with a vetted agent I trust. Discretion's part of the package. She signed where he pointed. Her hand steady, signature precise. Years ago, she used to curl her J like a flourish. Now it was all straight lines and business. By dusk, she was back home, breaking down another closet. This one Carter's old bedroom, which had slowly become a catch-all for things too sentimental to throw away and too heavy to keep. She found his baseball glove, stiff with time, his third-place science fair ribbon from 6th grade, a mug he'd made in ceramics class that said Donger One Mom in crooked red paint. She set it gently in a box labeled Donate. As she sealed the lid, her phone buzzed again. Carter. Just found a buyer for a listing upstate, made over asking. Could be a great time to sell if you're thinking about downsizing. Let me know, I can run comps. Janine stared at the screen. Her lips twitched, just slightly. The irony burned. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and warmth, like holidays used to smell, back when people still tried. Janine sat near the window in a corner booth, nursing a lukewarm coffee and watching steam rise from a silver tray of apple scones on the counter. Ava arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the same gray hoodie from the visit, sleeves pushed up, earbuds hanging like loose vines from her collar. She looked tired in a way only teenagers did, like everything was too loud, too sharp, too disappointing. She slid into the booth without ceremony, setting her phone face down. That alone told Janine something had shifted. I got your message, Ava said. Dad doesn't know I'm here. Janine nodded. That's all right. They sat in a hush thick enough to slice. Janine didn't fill it. She let Ava stir her iced chai 3 full rotations before the girl looked up. I'm not like them, Janine blinked. I never said you were. You didn't have to. Ava chewed the inside of her cheek. I see it, the way they talk at you, like visiting some chore, like you're the price of gas on a road trip they didn't want to take. Janine traced the edge of her cup with one finger, then looked up. Her voice was soft but not fragile. It's easier to walk away when no one expects you to stay. Ava's throat worked. Are you leaving? Janine didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her canvas tote and set a small wooden box on the table between them. Polished, old, hinges worn silver from years of opening and closing. Ava didn't touch it at first, just stared. What is it? Something for later. Janine sipped her coffee and waited. Ava finally lifted the lid. Inside was a faded photo of the two of them. Ava, maybe 7 years old. perched on Janine's lap at the county fair, face sticky with cotton candy, grinning so wide her missing teeth were the star of the shot. Janine had her arms around her like she meant it. Beneath that, a folded sheet of notebook paper with a list of books, titles Ava recognized immediately because of Winn-Dixie, Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, The Outsiders. The corner had a smudged note in Janine's handwriting. Our little library, yours now. And under that, nestled carefully in a patch of red velvet, a single brass key. Ava lifted it out slowly. What's this for? Janine didn't answer right away. She looked out the window. The light was changing, clouds pulling over the sun like curtains being drawn. A choice, she said at last. One day you'll need to let something go. Or maybe you'll need somewhere to land. That key opens both. Ava's voice was a whisper. You're not saying goodbye? I'm saying I trust you to know what to do when the time comes. Across the bakery, a bell chimed as someone left. The door shut hard against the cold. Ava looked down again at the key, then back up at her grandmother. If you sell the house, where will you go? Janine tilted her head, a private smile flickering like candlelight. Wherever I'm wanted. The cabin was smaller than Janine expected, but in the best way. Single story. Weathered siding with no HOA to fight her about. A porch deep enough for a rocking chair and a potted fern. Out back, a view of pine trees stacked like watchmen, their needles whispering things no one could quite translate. The only sound was the distant hum of wind brushing across the ridge, and the creak of the real estate agent's clipboard as he handed it over. No previous tenants in 5 years, he said. Owner kept it for his brother, but he passed. You'd be the first long-term lease in a while. Perfect, Janine said, already imagining the sound of rain against the tin roof. She walked slowly through the main room, bare beams overhead, stone fireplace untouched by ash. Wide plank floors that didn't complain when she moved. No ghost of Carter's laughter, no memory of Renee picking apart her cooking, no pencil marks on door frames, showing Ava's height across the years, just blank space, quiet, eager space. In the bedroom, a lone beam of sunlight fell across the floor in a long, warm stripe. I'll take it, she said, and signed the lease right there. The paper held flat on the hood of her car, keys promised in 3 weeks. Back home, she opened the linen closet and started pulling. The donation pile grew without mercy. Sweaters she'd mended too many times. Her mother's crocheted throw, always scratchy, never warm. Silver-plated serving spoons that had only been used once, and only because Carter's ex-girlfriend had asked about them. The second-best china, the apron she wore for Thanksgivings that ended in apologies she didn't owe. All of it into boxes marked giveaway. She didn't cry, not even when she reached the hope chest at the foot of her bed and opened it to find baby shoes, with Carter's initials burned into the leather. Now cracked and curling like old paper. She placed them gently on the pile, then covered them with a flannel robe and taped the box shut. Colleen showed up later with strong coffee and a stronger back. Together they sorted and bagged and lifted until the front porch looked like a garage sale, mourning its own past. Leaving's easier, Colleen said, tying off a trash bag, when the house already let go of you. Janine didn't argue. She just nodded, folding a dish towel in half before tossing it into the final donation box. Later that evening, she sat at the kitchen table and logged into every utility account she still remembered the password to. Water, electric, garbage, internet, all redirected. Forwarding address, Aaron Beck, Esker Confidential. She smiled faintly at the keyboard. Let Carter ask the mailman. Let Renee speculate. Let them both wonder when the fridge stopped humming and the lights went out and there was nothing left to inherit but silence. When she finished, she shut the laptop. The house was unusually still, as if it too was waiting for her next move. A knock at the door broke the pause. It was Jess from the library, holding a stack of books Janine had put on hold months ago and forgotten about. Small town favors didn't come with due dates. Jess peered past her at the boxes. You redecorating or starting a new chapter? Janine stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind her. Let's call it an edit. Jess smiled, but it was soft, reflective. You're not running, Janine. I know. You're editing. That landed. Janine accepted the books and watched Jess drive away, dust rising behind her tires like a curtain call. The pen glided across the closing documents without hesitation. Janine signed her name cleanly, without flourish. No looping J, no pause before the last S. Just the firm, unsentimental signature of someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for wanting peace. Aaron Beck sat across from her at his conference table, shuffling the notarized pages into a manila folder. Sunlight spilled in through the high window behind him. Dust particles dancing like they were celebrating for her. Funds will clear by Friday, Aaron said, tapping the final sheet. Official transfer will post to the county the same day. I'll confirm once it's recorded. Janine nodded, her hand still resting on the pen. It's a clean title, he added. They paid in cash. No contingencies, no inspections. No ghosts, she murmured. Aaron blinked. Pardon? Nothing, she said with a faint smile. Thank you, Aaron. She stood, tucked the pen into her purse, and walked out into the brisk morning like a woman stepping into her own future, not someone else's version of it. Back at the house, the walls looked more naked than she remembered. She had taken down the family photos the night before, frame by frame, in the quiet hour just after midnight, when memory loses its power. She didn't cry. Not even when she pulled the thumbtack from the one picture she'd always left up. Carter at 5 years old, in his Superman pajamas, hugging her leg like she was the safest place on earth. She didn't pack it. She didn't burn it either. She just laid it gently in the bottom of the donation box and taped the top shut. The final thing she did was write the note. It was short. Unfolded, plain white paper. Black ink. Do not forward. Do not return. She slid it into a thin envelope and left it tucked beneath the outdated wall phone in the kitchen, where it would wait like a question no one wanted to ask. Then she picked up her bags, just 2 suitcases, packed the way you pack when you know exactly what matters and what doesn't. One photo album tucked inside, between folded sweaters and a dog-eared copy of The Secret Garden. Ava's key was in her coat pocket. She touched it once, as if to confirm it was still there, and smiled. Outside, the autumn air snapped sharp and bright, the kind of morning that made the world feel new. Janine walked to the front door, glanced back one last time. Not with sentiment, but clarity. This was the house where she had cooked for people who didn't stay long enough to wash the dishes, where she had gone without so others could have more, where her name was written on the deed, but never respected on the door. She locked the handle, then turned the key in the deadbolt. Click, done. She slid the key into the realtor's drop box and got into her car. The driveway curved behind her as she pulled out. The street was empty. Not even a curtain moved. Not a soul had noticed. Not a goodbye. Not a fight. Just silence. She drove without music, windows cracked, wind rushing in like something cleansing. Her GPS was off. She didn't need directions. She knew exactly where she was going. When she reached the cabin, the porch was bathed in gold from the late afternoon sun, the trees behind it whispering a slow welcome. Janine stepped out of the car, stretched, and rolled her neck. Then she laughed. Not a bitter sound. A real one, the kind she hadn't made in years. 3 missed calls, 1 voice message, no reply. Carter sat in his Tesla, parked at the end of the street like a prowler, thumb hovering over the screen. The house was dark. The driveway was empty. The mailbox, half ajar, was no longer theirs. He hit record. You better be home, Mom, he said into the phone, jaw tight. You've got people trying to reach you. You can't just ghost your own family. He tapped send, then flung the phone onto the passenger seat. The leather squeaked beneath the sudden weight. He stepped out of the car and walked up the familiar path, gravel crunching under his boots like bones. The porch light was out. The curtain he used to peek through as a kid, the one with tiny strawberries sewn along the edge, was gone. The window stared back blankly. He tried the knob. Locked. His mouth pressed into a flat, angry line. He knocked twice, then 3 more times. Nothing. Carter took a step back and blinked against the late afternoon sun. He was halfway down the porch stairs when the phone dinged again. New email, Beck Law Office, notice of property transfer. He opened it. Dear Mr. Winters, this letter serves as formal notification that the property at address redacted has been sold and is no longer under the ownership of Janine Winters. All inquiries regarding the title, legal correspondence, or remaining liabilities may be directed to our office. He read it twice. Then again. No, this has to be wrong, he muttered, fingers scrolling furiously for the attached PDF. The seal was official, so was the signature. Janine's. A cold wave crashed into him, confusion first, then insult, then pure, undiluted rage. He'd been planning to propose updates, a mutual investment opportunity, just a small equity share, for her protection, he would have said, for family legacy, and she'd sold it, behind his back, without a word. He called her again, straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message this time, just paced the sidewalk like it could give him answers. In the Tesla, his phone buzzed with another message. Renee, did you know she was moving? This is ridiculous. We were supposed to inherit that place. She didn't even tell us she was thinking about selling. What is going on? Seconds later, Renee, is she okay? Ava was in her dorm room, curled up in bed with a worn copy of The Secret Garden, Janine's photo tucked inside the back cover. She stared at Renee's text and set the phone down on her chest, heart ticking steady and slow. She didn't reply right away. When she did, it was just one line. I knew she was done being used. No emojis, no apologies. She powered the phone off. Back on the street, Carter stood outside the house he'd once used as an emotional gas station, scowling at the sold sign that had just been hammered into the lawn. He looked around like someone had played a trick on him, like cameras were hidden in the bushes. But there was no audience, no punchline, just his own reflection in the black window glass, looking smaller than he remembered. The legal packet arrived at Aaron's office on a Wednesday. Heavy envelope, thick stock, no room for interpretation. Inside were notarized copies of Janine's capacity evaluations from 2 years back. Clean and current, handwritten notes in her own steady cursive, journals with appointment records, dates, witness names, and a timeline of every major step leading to the sale. Bank statements, inspection receipts, and her lease agreement, all cataloged with the kind of quiet precision no one ever credited her for. Jess from the library had even submitted a sworn statement. She renewed her own books, balanced her checkbook and pen, never once missed a deadline. If anyone in this town's more mentally sound than Janine Winters, I haven't met them. By Thursday afternoon, whatever half-formed challenge Carter's lawyer had been trying to float vanished like steam from a cracked teacup. There was no incompetence to prove, no trap to spring, no case to make. Janine hadn't just covered her tracks, she'd paved them in stone. That same day, a chill slipped between the trees, and Janine boiled water on the stove that still smelled faintly of pine. She moved slower these days, not from age, but because she could. She had nothing to hurry for, no one tapping their foot while she fumbled through drawers, no sighs from across the table when she didn't answer fast enough. Outside, a patch of late afternoon sunlight painted the porch in soft gold. She carried her mug, chamomile and orange peel, to the top step and sat cross-legged with a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. The trees whispered like always. The wind was colder now, but it didn't feel cruel, just honest. On a small notepad balanced against her knee, she wrote the title in block letters, Things I'm No Longer Responsible For. She underlined it twice, then listed their comfort, their calendar, their commentary, their surprise, their stories about what I owe, their version of me. She stopped at 6, not because she was finished, but because the teacup was empty, and the silence felt more satisfying than the list. A knock came just after dusk, not frantic, not rehearsed, just solid and familiar. Colleen. She held a medium-sized pot wrapped in brown paper and twine. Figured the porch could use some color. Janine unwrapped the paper slowly. Inside was a sturdy green plant with deep violet edges, hardy, a little wild. A Persian shield, Colleen said. It'll survive anything short of fire. Fitting, Janine replied, running her fingers gently across the leaves. They sat for a while in the soft dark, the mug between them now refilled and steaming. You know, Colleen said, when you left, I figured it'd take time for you to settle. I didn't leave, Janine replied. I arrived. Colleen leaned back in her chair and smiled. You never looked more rooted. Janine exhaled, steady. Funny, right? You spend half your life keeping a house standing. Turns out you don't need 4 walls to feel stable. The photo sat on the small shelf above Janine's writing desk, Ava, gap-toothed and beaming. Janine behind her, arms wrapped around her like a shield no one ever thanked. The county fair long gone, the cotton candy melted in memory, but the look in their eyes still held. Janine smiled at it now, not with longing, not with pain, just recognition. She opened the drawer beneath the desk and pulled out the final leather-bound journal she'd been writing in since the move. The pages were neat, filled with dates, lists, moments of anger that turned into laughter, and silence that bloomed into calm. Today's entry was short. Chapter closed. Square footage reclaimed. The door they never thought I'd lock behind me. Shut. Sealed. Mine. She signed it with a simple J. No last name. No ownership owed. Then she closed the cover and slipped a thick rubber band around it. A small, deliberate archive, not for anyone else's eyes. On the kitchen table sat the old wall calendar she'd taken from the donation pile as an afterthought. It still had stickers on it, stars and hearts from years past. Carter's birthday circled in red. Ava's recitals, doctor appointments, Mother's Day, Father's Day too, back when she still felt obligated to mark it. Janine slid the shredder close, its plastic frame humming softly like a waiting engine. One by one, she fed the pages through. May, June, October. Gone. The whir was gentle, cathartic. By the time she reached December, her hands no longer shook. The next thing was harder, but not impossible. She logged into her online healthcare portal. The password still scribbled on a post-it beneath the lamp. The interface blinked to life, all tabs tidy and gray. She navigated to emergency contacts. Carter James Winters, power of attorney, health proxy. She hovered. Then clicked remove. The screen blinked once. Gone. She typed in a new name. Colleen Grace, Franklin relationship, friend backup contact. None listed. She submitted it with no ceremony. No one else needed to hold the pen. That night, just before the porch light flicked off automatically, she leaned back in her chair and stared up at the stars, poking through the trees. Like scattered punctuation in a quiet letter from the universe. She hit call on one number. Ava didn't answer. Voicemail picked up on the second ring. Janine hesitated, then spoke. Hey honey, no need to call back. I just wanted to say thank you. For sitting across from me when no one else knew how to look me in the eye. You were the only one who saw the cracks. Not to shame them, just to understand they were real. A pause. The wind pushed gently at the porch screen. You saw me, she said. That was enough. She hung up, then breathed in the clean scent of night, smoke, pine, and whatever came after grief. Ava read the transcript the next morning, twice. Her heart swelled, tight and warm. She didn't cry. Instead, she texted one line. You rebuilt, and it's beautiful. Then she slipped the brass key from her necklace and laid it in her palm, not because she needed to use it, but because she was glad it existed. Aaron Beck's office was silent but not empty. It was the kind of room where emotion didn't echo. It absorbed. The shelves behind his desk held framed credentials, a single jade plant, and a brass scale that hadn't tilted in years. The air smelled faintly of cedar oil and toner, like something freshly printed but already settled. Carter stood at the window, arms crossed, tension threaded into every line of his jaw. He didn't sit. He paced in clean, tight lines, the kind of pacing that demanded answers before they were even offered. She's my mother, he said finally, and I have the right to know what she's done. Aaron folded his hands on the desk. Legally? You don't. Carter turned. You're hiding it. I'm honoring it. The words landed harder than they sounded. Carter narrowed his eyes. She wouldn't cut me out, not completely. Aaron didn't reply right away. He opened a drawer and removed a slim blue folder, setting it gently on the desk, one hand resting flat on the cover. Normally, I wouldn't share this, but she left me permission. For one document only. He opened the folder and rotated it toward Carter. It's a letter of intent, dated, signed, notarized. Carter hesitated, then stepped forward. At the top of the page, in unmistakable handwriting, was a title. Letter of Intent, Final. Beneath it, in clean block script, Janine's words, I, Janine Marie Winters, of sound mind and body, declare the following. I owe no inheritance to anyone who only remembered me when they needed fixing. I owe no legacy to those who confused my silence for agreement. I do not reward entitlement. I will not leave behind apologies I was never owed. This decision is not born from anger. It is born from clarity. At the bottom, her signature, strong, firm, undecorated. And beneath that, 2 witnesses. One name stood out instantly, Jess Tannenbaum. Carter's throat worked as he read the lines again, slower this time, trying to find a hole in them, some crack that made it temporary, reversible. Negotiable. She didn't mean this, he muttered. Aaron leaned back. She meant it enough to pay for 3 separate notarizations and an estate witness. Carter's voice rose. She didn't write this unless someone convinced her to. Aaron stayed still. His calm wasn't performative. It was practiced. Carter, he said evenly, no one had to convince her. She watched the same door stay closed for years, and finally realized it wouldn't open unless she locked it herself. Carter stepped back like he'd been pushed. You're siding with her. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm her attorney. I'm here to protect what she put in writing. She's not... Careful, Aaron said, his voice suddenly edged. Don't finish that sentence unless you want me to show you the capacity evaluations. Signed by 2 independent physicians, including her primary doctor and a licensed psychologist. Carter opened his mouth, closed it again. Rage and panic fought for space behind his eyes. He wasn't used to being dismissed, certainly not by someone who used paper instead of weapons. He moved to leave, then stopped, hovering at the edge of the desk. You think this is over? She cut me out of everything. She'll regret that. Aaron reached into the folder one last time. She anticipated that too. He pulled out a single white envelope and slid it across the desk. Carter didn't touch it. Another letter? He asked, sarcasm sharp. Aaron looked up at him, face unreadable. Closure, her words, not mine. Carter stood for a beat longer, unsure if he wanted to grab the envelope or burn the office down. Then he turned on his heel, coat swinging behind him, and stormed out. No goodbye. No threat loud enough to make a difference. The door clicked closed. Aaron exhaled and placed the envelope back inside the folder. At that same hour, miles north and far beyond the noise, Janine was dusting the small windowsill above her kitchen sink. The glass was clean. The view was pine trees and clouds, and nothing that needed to be owned. She reached for a small frame sitting on the windowsill. Black border, white card inside. The words printed in delicate serif. No one visits what they no longer own. She wiped the glass gently with a corner of her sleeve, then set it back against the wall. Next to it sat a fresh sprig of lavender from her garden box, cut that morning. The scent filled the room, subtle but sure. Behind her, the kettle clicked off. She poured hot water over 2 bags of chamomile and walked onto the porch, cup in hand. She didn't know Carter had tried to reclaim something. Didn't need to. She could feel the silence. And this time, it wasn't empty. It was earned. Janine didn't spend much time on social media anymore. She preferred the hush of pages turning to the endless scroll of people spinning curated versions of their lives like cotton candy, sweet, empty, gone in seconds. But that morning, with tea in hand and the woods veiled in soft fog, she opened her laptop and checked the town group chat, out of habit more than need. It took her less than 10 seconds to find it. A post from Renee, public, passive-aggressive, dressed up in faux grief. It's always sad when family chooses distance over dialogue. When walls go up instead of bridges. Some people just love rewriting history, don't they? 34 likes. 8 comments, mostly from people who'd never asked Janine a single thing about herself. Janine didn't reply. She didn't need to. She screenshotted the post, dragged it into a folder she'd started a few weeks ago on her desktop called Emotional Audit for when they pretend I was never here. Then she closed the laptop and exhaled slowly, the tea warming her fingers, not her heart. But someone else replied, Ava. The comment showed up under Renee's post 20 minutes later. Maybe don't insult the people who built the table you're mad you weren't invited to. That was it. No signature, no emojis. Just one truth that hit so clean, Renee deleted the entire post within the hour. Janine didn't mention it. She didn't call to say thank you. Didn't forward it to Colleen. Didn't highlight or print it for her binder. She just smiled. A knowing, private thing. Not triumph, not pride. Just recognition. Later that afternoon, she pulled out the navy binder she kept in the lower drawer of her writing desk. It was labeled in gold marker, Legacy, Final Copy. She flipped through each tab, reviewing the final versions of every choice she'd made in the past 6 months. Healthcare directives, living will, power of attorney, burial instructions. Simple, prepaid, no room for anyone to bicker over headstones. Letters, most important of all, the intent letter Carter had already seen. Aaron had 1 copy, the other would stay here. Janine tucked a final note into the back pocket, a personal reflection dated that very morning. Legacy is not about who's loudest at your funeral. It's about who made the least noise trying to control your life. She closed the binder, slipped it back into the drawer, nothing left to edit. At the library, Janine brought in 3 canvas totes packed tight with hardcovers and paperbacks. Decades of favorites, annotated and worn at the edges. Jess greeted her at the counter, blinking in surprise. "You sure about this?" Janine smiled. "Just time." They cataloged titles together. She watched as the system blinked them into the public archive, in honor of the Winters family. All except for 6 books. She kept those aside, quietly walked them over to the local author shelf, and slid them in without fanfare. Inside the front cover of each was a small embossed stamp she'd ordered online. Property of JMW. Read, loved, remembered. No dedication to Carter, no mention of Renee, no erasure, no exaggeration, just the truth, kept quiet and intact. That evening, as twilight curled through the trees, Colleen arrived with a pie she claimed was experimental but edible. They ate on the porch. No music. No need to fill the air with stories. Just 2 women who had survived enough to stop pretending they owed anyone explanations. Colleen looked out at the woods, then turned to Janine. "You erased them without touching them." Janine sipped her tea. "I didn't erase them." "You didn't leave a single photo up." "I didn't need to," Janine said. "I just stopped letting them take up space they didn't care about." Colleen let out a breath that could have been a laugh or a sigh. Same thing, really. Janine shook her head, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "No, erasing is done out of spite. I did this out of clarity." A pause passed, clean and comfortable. Then Colleen said, "Do you think they'll ever come looking again?" Janine didn't hesitate. They never really looked in the first place. The first holiday Janine allowed back into her life arrived with no warning, no decorations, and no expectation. Just Ava. They had agreed on it by phone. Simple, quiet, no performance. No holiday dinner. No performative plates. No folding chairs pulled from the garage to force a crowd. "Just you, me, and a good bottle of something non-alcoholic," Ava had said. "Unless you've gotten wilder in the woods than I thought." Janine laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was hers to say yes or no to. "Yes," she'd replied. No folding chairs, no leftovers. That evening, the cabin smelled of roasted vegetables and rosemary biscuits. 2 plates, 2 forks, cloth napkins folded with care, but not ceremony. They ate at the small kitchen table, the one Janine had refinished herself, sanded it down last spring while the birds came back, and the ground thawed under her boots. Ava lit a single candle, mostly for the way it looked reflected in the window. They didn't talk about Carter, or Renee, or who used to sit across from them and pretend the silence wasn't deliberate. Instead, they talked about books. The last one Janine had reread, The Secret Garden, again. The next one Ava wanted to write. They moved from literature to travel, places Ava wanted to go, towns Janine had once driven through when she was younger and certain every detour was a mistake. Now, detours felt like grace. After dinner, they took the trail behind the cabin. The path was narrow, lined with pine needles and leaves in stages of letting go. Ava walked ahead, flashlight tucked in her jacket pocket but unused. The moonlight was enough. "You think you'll ever move again?" Ava asked. "Maybe," Janine said, "but not because someone else needs me to." They walked in silence for a bit. Then Ava said, "I didn't think you'd want company this year." Janine smiled. "It depends on the company." Back at the cabin, Janine made tea while Ava rummaged through her backpack. She pulled out a small envelope, handmade, the flap taped with a single sticker of a pine cone. "For you." Janine opened it slowly. Inside, a folded card, thick cardstock, torn at the edges on purpose. Watercolor swirls in blue and violet. Inside, in Ava's neat, careful handwriting, "Gratitude isn't a demand. It's a decision. Thank you for choosing me." Janine didn't cry. She didn't need to. She placed the card gently inside her journal, between a page labeled New Rituals and another labeled Unlearned Obligations. She didn't say anything out loud, but she didn't have to. Ava just nodded. "I figured you'd keep it." The word visit used to make Janine brace. It meant hurry, it meant clean everything. It meant brace yourself for critique packaged as concern, for size at the seasoning, for silence when the dishes were cleared. But now, here in the middle of nowhere, where the trees knew her better than her own blood, visit no longer meant intrusion. It meant company. It meant choice. She let the kettle boil over, just a little. Neither of them moved to stop it. The next day, Janine walked into the library with a single manila folder labeled in clean black print. Relocation, closure file. Jess met her behind the circulation desk. Her glasses perched low on her nose like always. A thermal mug of coffee balanced on the scanner like it lived there. "You ready?" Jess asked. Janine nodded. "Ready." They sat at the back table, near the non-fiction shelves where nobody ever eavesdropped. Jess opened the folder, flipped through the checklist like a pro, mail forwarding confirmed, local registration updated, banking and voter info all squared away. "Everything transferred," Jess said, initialing the last page. "Nothing remains." Janine looked out the library's back window toward the hills. That phrase echoed differently than she expected. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like lightness. She reached across and placed her hand briefly over the folder. "Thank you," she said. Jess smiled, eyes kind but sharp. "You did all the work. I just clicked submit." That evening, Janine returned to the cabin just as the first snow flurried across the sky. It didn't stick, but it didn't need to. Even the suggestion of snow felt like punctuation. She pulled on her sweater, lit the candle Ava had brought, and opened her journal again. On a blank page, she wrote in black ink. Today felt nothing like tradition. And still, every part of it felt right. I wasn't hosting. I wasn't performing. I wasn't waiting for thanks. I shared a meal. I shared time. That's enough. That's everything. She placed the journal back in its drawer. No need to read it twice. The quiet outside wrapped itself around the cabin like a thick wool shawl. The papers arrived on a Thursday morning, folded in the kind of thick, textured envelope that said final without needing to say important. Erin's assistant had couriered it herself, a courtesy Janine hadn't asked for, but appreciated. She opened it at her kitchen table with a sharp silver letter opener and a clean slate for a heart. Inside, the official copy of her amended trust. It was signed, sealed, and filed. And Carter's name was nowhere in it. Not as beneficiary, not as executor, not even in the footnotes. For the first time in her life, Janine had drawn a legal boundary that didn't tremble under the weight of guilt. It held like steel. She ran her fingers down the page once. Slowly, the ink pressed into the paper like it was stitched there. She'd done it. No turning back, no second version, no room for edits. Ava's name, however, appeared more than once. Not as heir, not exactly. That wasn't what Janine wanted to hand down. But listed instead under a new heading Erin had helped her draft: Legacy Stewardship, Non-Financial Archives. It included her journals, her correspondence, the essays she never published but still wrote in longhand, the hard copies of her medical decisions, with notations Ava might someday need to reference for herself. Janine didn't want Ava to carry weight. She wanted her to carry understanding. At the bottom of the clause was a single sentence. This legacy is not an inheritance. It is a record of learned freedom. Erin had underlined it twice in his office copy. She hadn't asked him to. he just had. The remainder of her assets, what little was left after the quiet cabin life she'd chosen, was set aside for a cause that had taken root in her mind over the winter. The Women's Financial Independence Initiative, a local program started out of the community college in town for women leaving controlling households with nowhere else to go. Janine hadn't just donated, she'd created a microgrant in her name to be awarded annually. Eligibility requirement: must have left something behind that wasn't good for you, even if it wasn't violent. Even if no one else thought it was a problem. That was it. That line had made Erin's paralegal cry. Janine hadn't meant to write a mission statement. She just hadn't known how to lie anymore. Back in Erin's office, the paperwork was boxed and stored. Accompanied by a final instruction Janine insisted be typed on yellow paper and clipped to the front. Per. Her instruction: no appeals. Honored. Below that, her initials in permanent marker. Large, clear, unapologetic. Erin filed the box himself, and then he smiled. In early spring, Janine began spending her Thursdays at the Women's Center. She didn't lead workshops. She didn't give speeches. She cleaned the kitchen, sorted donations, taught one woman how to open her first bank account without her husband's cosign, held a baby while its mother filled out housing applications in a trembling hand. She became part of the rhythm of the place, not its face, not its savior, just part of it, steady, present, unbothered. One afternoon, she brought in a bag of unused journals and left them in the break room with a note. You don't have to know how it ends to start writing it down. By the end of the day, all 10 were gone. Colleen stopped by the center one Friday, dropping off clothes from her sister's garage and sticking around long enough to catch Janine disinfecting the microwave. They sat on the back steps for a few minutes before heading home. You didn't just leave, Colleen said, handing over a ginger chew from her jacket pocket. You invested in your own exit. Janine popped the candy into her mouth, let it sting the corners of her tongue before answering. Leaving wasn't the hard part. What was? Leaving without the need to be chased. Colleen nodded. And? Janine's mouth curved, slow and certain. And I never needed to be chased. I needed to be left alone. That night, Janine filed her own copy of the trust into a drawer labeled, Everything I Meant to Say. She didn't expect anyone to read it one day. That wasn't the point. The point was that it was real, legal, enforceable, and not just enforceable in court, but in her own life. No phone call could undo it. No guilt trip could revise it. No birthday, holiday, or shared bloodline could overwrite the words. No appeals honored. She brewed tea, curled up in the chair beside the window, and watched the wind move through the trees. She no longer needed to say, I don't owe you. Now, she just lived it. Carter called twice, texted once, then sent a voice memo because silence was starting to feel like an insult. Ava, can you call me back? I just need 5 minutes. You know I've always been straight with you. This thing with your grandmother, it's gone too far. No reply. He stared at the screen, the little delivered checkmark sitting there like a smirk. She'd read it. She just didn't care to respond. He tried again the next day. Then again, still nothing. He opened Instagram. Her account was private now. New profile picture. No sign of him in it. He tried Facebook. Same. Tried calling Colleen. Voicemail. Even tried Erin's office, but the assistant said flatly, Mr. Beck has no further communication scheduled with you. Carter felt like the world had turned to glass around him, familiar shapes, but nothing he could touch. So he got in his car and drove. The street was still there, technically, but the house wasn't his mother's anymore, not even close. Fresh paint, new numbers mounted beside the front door. The mailbox replaced, the lawn no longer scorched in spots from years of neglect. Even the tree stump in the yard, the one from that summer he'd tried to build a swing, was gone. He parked across the street and stared. A woman came out onto the porch with a toddler on her hip, both of them laughing at something small and ordinary. She turned, caught him watching, and hesitated. Then shut the door. The garage keypad had been replaced. He noticed the difference without even stepping out of the car. Everything he'd once had access to, every shortcut, every favor, every key, was gone. The code, the lock, the expectation, gone. 2 towns over, Janine was standing at her kitchen counter, canceling the last landline account in her name. She'd kept it longer than she meant to. Out of habit, maybe. Or because she didn't want to be unreachable all at once. But she was ready now. She gave the rep her new cell number, a different area code, simpler voicemail, untraceable unless she gave it to you herself. After she hung up, she deleted her old number from the backup cloud, then shredded the handwritten phone log she used to keep in the drawer beneath the toaster. There were no calls left she wanted to return. Erin marked the final document in her file. Client status, closed loop notes. All directives satisfied. No outstanding legal or financial obligations. Successor structure in place per written request. Do not forward correspondence. He double-checked the access settings. Password protected, encrypted. Even if Carter tried to subpoena again, there was nothing left to fight for, nothing left to guilt into undoing. That weekend, Ava received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She let it ring out, checked the voicemail later. It was Carter. Ava, I don't know what's going on between you and your grandmother, but I think she's made a mistake. We're still family. We can fix this. She didn't delete it, didn't save it either. She forwarded the message to a folder she'd started weeks earlier, one she labeled Echoes. Then she opened a new note on her phone, typed one line. Some people leave quietly. She left permanently. She set the phone down, then reached into her desk drawer and pulled out the journal Janine had gifted her, the one with the blank pages she hadn't dared to fill yet. She opened to the first page and wrote, not to answer Carter, not to explain. But because some stories don't start until the door is locked behind you, for good. The trail ran alongside the lake like it had always been there, untouched by family calendars or expectations. No swings, no overgrown flower beds. No ghosts of Sunday visits that never went well, just breeze. Janine walked slowly, a light scarf trailing behind her, the morning mist still lifting from the water in silent threads. Ducks floated near the edge, their movements soft and unhurried, unafraid. There was no memory attached to this stretch of land, no anniversary, no photograph, no version of her younger self, standing here and wondering what else she had to give. It was the absence that comforted her, not nostalgia, not pride, just the clean space of a life made present. At the curve in the trail, she stopped for a moment and looked out across the lake. A single bench sat tucked beneath a birch tree, damp with dew. She didn't sit. She breathed in, then out. Not to anchor herself, but because she didn't have to be anywhere else. Back at the cabin, the kettle clicked off. She poured the water over loose leaves, lavender and lemon balm, and watched the steam rise like a soft exhale. On the windowsill, the Persian shield Colleen had gifted her thrived in the late spring light. Purple leaves curled upward, reaching with no sense of urgency. Janine took her tea to the desk, where her journal lay open beside the final box, the last one. It had been sealed for months, labeled simply, for when it feels done. Today it did. She opened it. Inside were loose papers, a single scarf, one photo of her at a protest in the 80s, and the dried petals of a gardenia she once wore behind her ear. No family heirlooms, no medals of motherhood, just the pieces of herself she'd tucked away to survive. She set each one on the desk like items in a private exhibit. No audience, no plaque, no need to explain. She folded the scarf into her drawer, slid the photo into her journal, and scattered the gardenia petals across the top of the compost bin. Then she broke down the cardboard, flattened it with one hand. No labels left. Her phone buzzed once, a photo from Ava. No caption, just an image. Ava's new apartment, sparsely decorated, light-filled. On the nightstand, a framed picture of the two of them from the county fair years ago. Sticky smiles, wind-blown hair, joy that didn't ask permission. Janine tapped the image once to enlarge it. Her eyes softened. Then she typed, "Legacy isn't real estate, it's relief." Ava replied a minute later, "It's breath, not burden." Janine smiled, set the phone down. She spent the rest of the afternoon alphabetizing her books, not because they needed organizing, but because she liked the feel of order that didn't scream for attention. The cabin creaked gently as the wind moved through the trees. No knocks, no pop-ins, No one asking if she needed help with something they'd criticize after offering. Just space and time, and the sound of her own life unfolding at a pace she controlled. She walked out onto the porch at dusk, wrapped herself in a light shawl, and watched the sun vanish behind the ridgeline like a curtain falling on a play she didn't audition for but had finally rewritten. She sipped the last of her tea, then opened her journal one final time that day. On the first page, she wrote the last line of her story, a sentence that had lived at the base of her spine for years, one she hadn't dared speak aloud until now. My son said, "You should be grateful we visit," so I made sure there was nothing left to visit. She closed the journal, not with sadness, but with certainty. There was nothing left undone, only what was hers,